And now to talk more about Indonesia's role amidst these geopolitical tension and global economic challenges, we are now joined by the Rector of University of Indonesia, Professor Ari Kuncoro. Hello, Prof. Ari, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Yeah. Good evening, Mbak.
Good evening. Thank you again for joining us. Prof. Ari, take us to what your take is on the President on the President of Indonesia, Joko Widodo, attending the G7 summit, and now is on a peace building mission between Ukraine, where he'll be visiting Ukraine and also Russia. He is already in Ukraine, but will be visiting Russia as well. What do you think, what kind of an impact or what kind of role can Indonesia play among the so many challenges that we are facing today?
Yeah, President Widodo represents the voice of the countries around the world that actually not involved in the conflict. So what happened in the Northern Africa country that depend very much on the imported food, wheat, they now have a problem. Yeah, first they have a rising food price, and the second they have increase in the dollar index. So it's a double hit. I think President Widodo represents the third party, and he has the credibility. Indonesia will host the G20 meeting next October. That is the credibility he has. And most importantly, also, Indonesia has some weight from its population, as well as from the economic size. Mm-hmm. And I think this is very important because, just my view, I think the war and conflict in Europe is getting more and more personal. Mm. So we need somebody from outside the circle to go to represent the rest of the world and talk honestly that it is time to stop the conflict. Of course, in the end, how it will be resolved, it would depend on those involved in the conflict. Yeah. But I think it is the first start for a country like Indonesia to say something to both sides.
And it seems like it's you know, President Joko Widodo is assuming an effective mediator in this case between perhaps the West and Russia, but we know that it's not going to be an easy task. So what do you think the aim should be, and what are the options right now to, you know, when we talk about the imminent food crisis? We also heard the president saying that it's the G7 and the G20 member countries' responsibility to also tackle this problem together. So what are the options right now, Professor Ari?
Yeah, I think if we talk about mediation, probably it is too early, because both sides now have high emotion for to win the war. But I think President Widodo can present the grim fact. Right now, the inflation in the Western country actually is very, very high. In the U.S., 8.6% in May, and just in the previous session, we heard from Madame Lagarde in the Eurozone is 8.9%. Mm-hmm. And if you read the paper, in the US, for example, 58% of the respondents say that they live paycheck to paycheck. And 30% of those are households with income around 250,000 a year. That is actually well-established middle class. But they now said that, wait a minute, the inflation still is going to beat us. So this is very important. And I think the Western democracy right now, they're beginning to understand that this will be decided by the voter in the midterm election. We have been seeing the movement of voter preference. For example, Macron just lost the absolute majority in the lower house. That, I think, to send a message to leader, please find the solution. Probably will not satisfy everybody,
Yeah.
But right now, I think the conflict is going on. I think the task of President Widodo is simply to present the humble and honest, grim fact.
Correct. So when we talk about the first step, like when we talk about what can be done in ending the war in Ukraine, it all revolves around these sanctions that have been, have been put against Russia. You know, the EU and the US have affirmed that they are not sanctioning food exports. Let's say, do you think that the West are increasingly going to the middle, are easing their sanctions against Russia? Is this a positive step towards ending the war in Ukraine?
Yeah. If we talk about sanction, actually what we read from the headline, actually they want to impose further sanction on Russia. But the problem is economic reality. Right now, the more sanction imposed on Russia, the higher inflation in the Western country. So for example, if the Western country want to impose total blockade of the oil and gas from Russia, it will run the risk that the price of the oil will go as high as 200 US dollar per barrel. So it's basically, that is the end of the market economy right now. So I think that's the grim reality. But at the same time, Russia also needs to understand that they need to give some kind of offering. So this is the question of saving face. Yeah. Saving face on both sides.
Yeah.
But right now, I think it is probably too early to say to the Western country to loosen the sanction, because it is now the conflict become more political.
Yeah.
The most realistic, I think, is to ease the food supply from Ukraine.
Yeah.
I think the Western country has been working on that, and they try to activate port in Romania through Odessa. And they also try to have export of Ukraine wheat overland going through Poland and going to Baltic Sea.
Yeah.
But it will take some time to happen, because it's not very easy.
Okay,
you know that the railway in Eastern Europe is not the same. Wide gauge, narrow gauge, normal gauge, so it will be a logistical nightmare. But I think the first step is to ease the pressure on food price.
Okay, will it be enough when we talk about the imminent food crisis that has been discussed globally? But let's take a break. We'll pick this up right after this. Welcome back, and we're still talking to the Rector of the University of Indonesia, Professor Ari Kuncoro. Professor Ari, you in the previous segment you mentioned that ending the blockade on Ukrainian exports, food exports, could be a solution to solving the imminent food crisis that the global community is facing right now. But when we talk about the root cause of this global food crisis, what else is on the table right now, Prof. Ari? What happened? How did we get here?
Yeah, I think logistical thing for food is the first thing. But there also are other problems. First is the payment system. How you can pay to import wheat from Russia and from Ukraine. And for those countries who want to import, do they have cash? So I think the World Bank or IMF needs to establish a World Emergency Fund Relief. So the country that actually running deficit on foreign exchange can borrow with the low interest rate to buy wheat from Russia and Ukraine. And at the same time, Ukraine and Russia will be guaranteed satisfactory price. And also, G20 forum can be used for countries that actually export food to restrain themselves from pushing the road of food nationalism. For example, in India, they ban the export of wheat. Yeah, I think need some kind of organization like OPEC, but this is not OPEC, but Organization of Food Exporting Countries. And they want to regulate the balance between domestic consumption and those can be exported to other countries to relieve the food price. I think G20 very relevant to do this. But I think international institutions like World Bank, IMF can also step in. I think the problem more complex. Also the shipment. How about the shipment?
Yeah.
Can the ship, the transporting wheat can be fully insured? Because there is a plan to impose sanction on the insurance company. They actually insure the Russian ship.
Yeah.
So many things need to be done, not just the logistical related thing related to food.
Yeah. So what are you projecting, like amidst the war in Ukraine and also the imminent food crisis, energy crisis, also fear of inflation going up? How does Indonesia stand in all of this? Should we be worried?
Yes, Indonesia is blessed with the natural resource. So for Indonesia, the problem is how to manage the crisis. For example, like in the case of the cooking oil, we try the policy of banning export and then going back, allowing export, but with some regulation for domestic consumption. That we need to be done. Indonesia has 12-hour sunshine, so it's not a problem. The problem is only distribution. But I think it is actually not fair if Indonesia think about itself. I think this is the time for Indonesia to step in to show the world that Indonesia also has contribution to the food crisis. I think products like crude palm oil, CPO, can be used to show the goodwill of Indonesian. And this will also invite India, the wheat producer, to do the same. I think by showing some kind of empathy, some kind of example, everyone will be interested to join the table, how to solve the food crisis. I think for energy and oil and gas, I think it's much more complex. But the food actually is more manageable. It is the byproduct of the conflict, while the oil and gas actually become the weapon of sanction. Like many mentioned, that actually the West has not imposed sanction on food. That's true. But the problem is not that easy to import food from the war zone, like in Ukraine.
Very well. Thank you so much for joining us on this show, the Rector of the University of